Hey everybody, we are a new channel, so don't forget to like this video if you enjoy the content that we're making. Also, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. Since we're very new, that really helps us out immensely. Also, click the bell icon for notifications so that you don't miss out on any future videos. And I'd really love to know what you all think in the comment section. Please add your comments so we can keep the discussion going, and I'd really love to know if any of these facts are new to you. So without further ado, here are 25 amazing facts about Christianity that you did not already know. Number 1, the Socratic Method. Jesus was very Socratic in his teaching method. He actually asks about 340 questions throughout the New Testament. And also, he only answers about 10 questions that are directly asked to him. Depending on some authors, the number of questions he answers is maybe as low as only 3 questions. Fact number 2, Christianity is the most geographically diverse religion. Christianity is actually the only religion that has a large indigenous following on every single inhabited continent. Fact number 3, Christianity is ethnically diverse. Christianity is the most ethnically diverse religion on earth, and it's the only religion without any individual ethnic majority. It's about 34% Latin American, 25% European, 25% African, and 13% Asian. No other major religion on earth has so much demographic balance. Fact number 4, the Gutenberg Bible. You probably already know that in 1455, the era of mass book production started with the mass production of the Bible. There are actually still 50 copies that you can read today of the Gutenberg Bible still in existence, and you can also still read the Gutenberg Bible online for free. I'll put a link in the comment section. But what you probably don't already know is that Gutenberg himself never profited from his invention. He gave the world maybe one of its most important intellectual inventions in history, and then he got sued by the person who financed him, and he lost everything in a court case. So Gutenberg actually died being totally penniless. Fact number 5, Christians invented adoption. So in the first century, throughout the Roman Empire, infant exposure was a very common practice. What this meant was, if you had a child who was disabled or who had any physical deformities, or even if that child was just female and you just didn't want it, you could just leave the child out in the open, and that child would just slowly die of the elements. So Christians actually created foundling wheels where people could actually deliver these babies if they were unwanted. This is the first actual example of an adoption system, and this is a precursor for what we have now, which are modern safe spaces, where kids can be delivered to safe spaces so they can get medical care and eventually get adopted if they're unwanted by their original families. Fact number 5, Christians also invented hospitals. The very first hospitals were Christian institutions. In the 4th century, hospitals started as places where people who were sick could get care, even if they weren't particularly wealthy. Prior to that point, any physician coverage that was delivered to people was delivered by mobile physicians, usually, or mobile doctors, and it was only usually afforded to people who were very, very wealthy. So modern healthcare essentially owes its origin to the 4th century when the Christians actually started caring for people in hospital institutions. Fact number 7, wide translations of the New Testament. There are actually 3,700 translations for the New Testament. It's the most translated book ever in history. The second most translated book, which is a very distant second, only has been translated into 500 languages, although that's still very impressive. And that's a book called The Little Prince, which started off in French and then was translated to multiple other languages. It's a great little book, by the way. I read it when I was a kid. Fact number 8, weird translations. In 2016, the King James Version was probably translated into its weirdest format when it was translated into emojis. There's also a Morse code Bible, and the Bible's been translated into a lot of other weird languages. In fact, the Lord's Prayer has been translated into Klingon and Elvish. Fact number 9, the Bible has been really widely disseminated. There are 6 billion Bibles that have been printed throughout human history. Now that's about 3/4 of a Bible for each and every person on Earth. Fact number 10, most people assume that the first Christian nation in the world was probably the Roman Empire, but actually Armenia was the very first Christian nation in 301 AD. Fact number 11. Fish was the symbol of Christianity long before the cross. In fact, a kind of neat way where Christians would identify themselves is one Christian would walk up to another and draw one half of a fish in the sand, and the other Christian would draw the other half of the fish. And that way they each knew that the other person was okay. Fact number 12. The patron saint of teeth. Patron Saint Appalonia is the patron saint of teeth. She actually has a really moving story. In addition to being the patron saint of teeth, because all her teeth were knocked out, she actually sacrificed herself at the end of her life. The way she sacrificed herself is there was a Roman guard who was going to kill her, and she threw herself in the fire and pushed the Roman guard away, even though he was much larger than her. And the reason why she did this, reportedly, is because she didn't want him to be guilty of the sin of murder. So she essentially wanted to save him from that sin by throwing herself in the fire. Fact number 13. Obergal, or 400 Years of the Passion Play. In 1633, during the Black Plague, there was a German village called Obergal, which vowed that if they were spared from the Black Plague, then they would perform the Passion Play continuously for every 10 years if God was able to spare them. Well, they did survive the Black Plague, and they've kept that vow nearly totally unbroken for about 400 years. Every 10 years on the mark, they put on a Passion Play. Fact number 14, Holy Pancakes. Shrove Tuesday is the day before Lent starts. That actually became a Christian informal holiday called Pancake Day because right before Lent, people would want to use up their eggs, their butter, and their sugar right before they started fasting. So yeah, you can have a stack of pancakes on the Tuesday before Lent and say that you're celebrating Holy Pancake Day. Fact number 15, the entire Old Testament is a single song. So if you have a Masoretic copy of the Old Testament, there's a system of cantillation marks called ta'amim. I may be mispronouncing that. And those cantillation marks include melodic patterns. So the entire Old Testament is actually meant to be sang as a song. That's actually how people remembered it. Just like people remember long series of numbers in pi by singing songs about pi, the Old Testament was meant to be memorized in the same way, as a song. Fact number 16. The shortest verse in the Bible is John 11:35, and it's just 2 words, Jesus wept. The longest verse, interestingly, is Esther 8:9, but it's not maybe as interesting. In the King James Version of the Bible, it contains 90 words and more than 400 characters. In Hebrew, it's also the longest verse by word count. It's basically an ancient bureaucratic memo detailing some information about the king's scribes, the timing, the languages used, and the recipients of the king's decree. It reads kind of like a Bible version of a very legalistic contract. Fact number 17, a light during the Dark Ages. Christian monks probably should get more credit than they do for preserving a lot of classical era knowledge during the Dark Ages. They copied not only scripture, but they also copied a lot of texts that are really important to Greek science and literature. Fact number 18. Did you know Christians also invented the autobiography? St. Augustine's Confessions is considered the very first autobiography in Western literature. Fact number 19. Blessed Lobster. So St. Francis of Assisi was well known as an animal lover. And there's a Blessing of the Animals festival that occurs on St. Francis of Assisi Day, which is, I think, October 4th, and please correct me if I'm wrong. Churches around the world invite people to bring their pets and animals for a special blessing. A pet lobster is probably the weirdest animal that I could find that was blessed. It was blessed by an Episcopal church in Massachusetts. The priest reportedly sprinkled it with holy water, and hopefully not too much hot water, and hopefully not butter. But this was offered as a prayer of protection for the crustacean. There have also been blessings of a boa constrictor, a 3-toed sloth, a camel in Florida, and an iguana named Elijah at a Lutheran church in Wisconsin. There have been a lot of other weird animals like goats and llamas and other animals that belong to either church community members or even leaders of the church. Fact 21, peacocks. Interestingly, peacocks were also an early symbol of Christians. So Christians, after they had the symbol of the fish and before they had the symbol of the cross, one of the symbols that they cycled through was the symbol of the peacock. This was thought to be because ancient Romans and early Christians believed that peacock flesh didn't decay after the peacock died. So writers like Augustine and other early Christian writers talk about the peacock's incorruptibility, and that made it a powerful religious symbol to a lot of early Christians. Fact number 22, the Ark of the Covenant. Raiders of the Lost Ark would have you believe that the Ark of the Covenant is locked away in some government facility. But actually, a lot of believers think that the real Ark of the Covenant is housed by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. And the Ethiopian Orthodox Church indeed claims to house the very real Ark of the Covenant in a chapel in Axum. However, only one monk is ever allowed to see the Ark of the Covenant, and that monk has to guard that Ark, for the entirety of the monk's life. It's one of the most enduring sacred secrets of the world, but it's not widely verified for a lot of the reasons I mentioned. Fact number 24. There's no word for church service in the Bible. In fact, there's no word for church, actually. The closest word is ecclesia, which is just an assembly of people. Most of you may know the Spanish word for church, which is iglesia, which is borrowed from this word ecclesia. In fact, the word for Christianity doesn't even show up in the Bible. There's 3 parts of the Bible where the word Christian is used, but in almost all 3 cases, it's used very pejoratively. In fact, early Christians called their movement the Way. That was used twice, once in Acts 9:2 and once in Acts 19:9. Or it was called the Faith, as in Galatians 1:23, or it was called the Teaching or the Truth. So the term Christianity didn't start getting used widely until much later. Fact number 25. Cliffhanger. The book of Acts kind of ends in a funny way without closure. The story ends with Paul under house arrest in Acts 28. There's no trial for Paul, no death, and no resolution. It's widely believed, though, that this was intentional. In other words, what was meant to be conveyed was that the story of Christianity wasn't over. It was still continuing through the listener. And also they thought that there would be more books that might get added later. So Christianity kind of ends the New Testament as a bit of a cliffhanger. All right, so what did you think of these facts? These were kind of fun to learn for me, and I wanted to make a video that was a little more lighthearted. Don't forget, we are a brand new channel, so I would really love it if you like this video. That would really mean a lot to us. If you subscribe to the channel as a new channel, that really helps us out tremendously. Also, please click the bell icon so you get notifications and you don't miss out on future videos. And the most important thing is put some comments in the comment section. I really want to know what all of you think. I'd love to know if these facts were interesting to you, if these were things that you didn't already know, and if you want to see more amazing facts about Christianity, please let me know in the comment section. Well, thanks for checking out this video, and as always, please have a really wonderful day.